really everybody always thinks about a home as being an investment, right? Well, it's only a good investment insofar as there's a market for it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Commercial Real Estate Secrets. I'm your host, Austin Hare. Our guest today is Daryl Cunningham. He is the VP of Real Estate and Development at Riccobene Associates Dentistry. Riccobene has been around since the year 2000. They've got locations in North Carolina and Virginia, and they now have over 40 locations, growing at it with a two-pronged strategy of both de novo and acquisition. So they're really making some waves, doing a great job. Daryl, thanks for coming on the show today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Austin. Appreciate it.
All right, cool. So we share the commonality of having some stomping ground in, the east, northeast, or I guess southeast North Carolina. I'm from South Carolina myself, and so you guys are North Carolina and Virginia area. So it's a great part of the country to be able to call home.
I agree. It's got just a little bit of everything: mountains to the west, beach to the east, and everything in between.
Yeah. So let's talk about your story and how you got here. Where were you born exactly? What part of the country?
I was born in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the year 1967. We lived there until I was about 7 years old. And then we relocated. By that time, my younger brother had been born, and we relocated back to my parents' hometown of Aztec, New Mexico. And that's located up in the northwest corner of New Mexico near the Colorado border. And so I spent, virtually the rest of my growing years in Aztec, graduated from high school there as well.
Okay. And so, I know that right now you're VP of real estate. Prior to that, you were in pharmaceutical sales. So when you were in high school, did you have any idea this is the path that was going to be laid out for you?
Absolutely none. Things have not gone the least bit how I would have expected.
What were you thinking? What did you want to be and what changed?
That's a great question, and it's something that I use with my kids and any other teenagers I can get my hands on, if you will, is to start asking yourself that question as early on as life as possible, because I didn't do that. I kind of lived from day to day in the moment with that typical young man mindset of I got the tiger by the tail and we'll just figure it out along the way.
Okay. So then what happened? What eventually happened that led you, I'm guessing did you go to college somewhere before starting that career?
Yeah, so finished high school, and I dating a young lady from school, and we ended up moving together to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I spent about 2 years working construction down there in various fields. And of course, where I grew up, it was very DIY, so it was a pretty natural thing to be able to do that. And then one night, it kind of occurred to me that I really didn't want to be like that 40-year-old guy I was working with, swinging a hammer, digging ditch, laying pipe. So I was very fortunate to have a grandfather who was successful in the oil and gas industry early on and had set money aside for college for both me and my brother. And so called my parents up and said, hey, is the offer still good? They were like, absolutely. So in 1987, summer of, headed down to Las Cruces, New Mexico, to New Mexico State University, and got enrolled there in summer session 1, and then it just kind of took off from there. So that's really what got me on the path of getting into the professional line of work.
Yeah, I kind of had a similar experience. So it's kind of funny because I remember I wanted to make money really bad from a young age, and I was too young. I legally couldn't work, and McDonald's was the only place that would hire at 14. So the second I turned 14, I went out and I got a job at McDonald's. And it was brutal. This was 15, 20 years ago, and 20 years ago actually. And so, minimum wage is $5.15, and you could work all day, 8 hours, and after taxes, because they held your taxes, I got $32.
Right.
And so, and I remember looking around, and I was the youngest one there, obviously, and there's people that are older than me. I remember same thing as you, looking around and just being like, I do not want to be that when I grow up. No matter what happens, and it's nice, to make a little bit of money or whatever, early on, but I could just tell, this is not the direction that I want my life to handle. And so I focused, I worked hard at sports because I was a wakeboarder as a living, but I also worked hard at school, and I just said, I'm going to make good grades, and I am not going to get stuck in this cycle. And so, yeah, I think there's a big similarity there. It's that you kind of look ahead what's on your future if you stay on this path and you have an awakening. I need to change, or
Yep.
Nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, that's just it. And that, it's not to say anything disparaging or demeaning or anything about that guy I was describing. It's just I had an opportunity that a lot of people didn't, and I just felt like that now was the time to jump on that before you got in that life rut, if you will, where you're making the money, then you get the car and the house, and you're kind of locked in at that point.
Yeah, yeah. Well, everybody's different, right? Maybe he likes doing that. It wasn't me. That's for sure. And I don't think it's most people who are listening to this podcast either. So, So directly out of college, what was your first job?
Well, right out of college, I ended up through a guy that I was friends with in the department. Got me an interview with Los Alamos National Labs, and so I got on board with them for about a year and a half with an internship, and that was really cool. I mean, living in the mountains of New Mexico, mountain biking and skiing in the wintertime, and just having a ball. And come out of college, poor broke college student, and they're all of a sudden paying me $26,000 a year. I was like, hey, I'm rich now. This is great. And so did that for a year and a half, and then it was kind of running out. So I wasn't still really focused on what to do. I had a degree in microbiology with chemistry built in there.
That's a really hard degree.
I don't even know. I think it was I enjoy working in the labs, and I enjoy the discovery and the experimentation and things like that. That fits me well, but the being in the lab inside all day wasn't really a great fit. So I went back to graduate school for a semester, and that was all I could tolerate. It was at that point that I made the decision that, hey, you know what? I had a really profound calling to serve the country. So in 1994 is when I made the decision to join the Navy.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Actually, my dad was in the Navy. So how long did you do that for?
It was this is a very kind of unique story. I was in the Navy for about 2 years. I joined the Navy with the idea of going to special warfare, and at the time I didn't ask enough questions. The recruiter wasn't really either knowledgeable or forthcoming. So long story short, I ended up getting a job type that wasn't what they call a source rating for special warfare, and through a series of events basically ended up parting ways with the Navy on amicable terms, if you will. So I didn't do the full enlistment, had an honorable discharge, and kind of got back to my life. It was a good experience, and I regret the way things went, but at the same time, I was very focused on what it was I wanted to do, and the Navy just wasn't very flexible in helping me get there.
So yeah, I think it's always interesting with the Army and the Navy because there's a lot of entrepreneurs and kind of Jocko Willink is a great example, but people go in, to the service and it really helps sharpen, their edge, like how iron sharpens iron or whatever. And they are able to take a lot from what they've learned at their time there and apply that to the real world and have incredible companies and incredible careers. So what do you think were some of the biggest things that you learned with your time there?
It's people have asked me that before, and they recognize I'm a very highly organized person and so forth, and they want to attribute that to the Navy. And I'm kind of like, when I got to the Navy, it was frustrating for me how slow it moved and how disorganized it was.
Wow.
So I think what I really took away from it was a great appreciation for, even though me as an individual could move faster and exercise greater organizational skills, it helped show me that you still have to work with the rest of the organism. You know what I mean? Even though you might be ready to move, it's not. And so it taught me some patience and just an appreciation for working within the system for, the greater good of the mission, if you will, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. So when you got out, or I guess you decided to get out, you said after 2 years, what caused you to get out? Was it a job opportunity or were you just over it?
No, that was it. I kept telling my upline, I was like, look, because I got through basic training, went through a year's worth of job training, if you will, which is very unique. So when I came out of basic training, I came out as an E4, not an E2 or E3. And so spent a year in Connecticut doing training, and that's where I ended up meeting my wife. I got stationed on a submarine. It was the second to last Miami-class submarine, the USS Greenville 776. and she was just barely in the water and in the yards over at Newport News. And so coming on board, getting, qualified in topside watch and below decks underway, went through commissioning. They moved her across the river to the naval base. And in that period of time, I did get selected to go down to combat scuba training in Panama City, Florida, which you're probably aware of down there. They have the naval salvage and dive training facility there. So that was 6 weeks of really intense training, and I absolutely loved it. That was a piece of what I was really trying to go for in joining the Navy. And did that, came back, did a couple of sea trial underway, 7 days, 8 days here and there, and boy, I discovered in a big hurry. And I told them in basic training that submarines are not where I want to be, and this whole big long story behind if you don't take that, you kind of start from scratch, all that kind of business. So I just told my first class and my chief petty officer, I said, guys, this isn't going to work. The only reason I joined the Navy to ever be on a submarine was to be in an SDV, and that's not happening.
SDV, what's that?
That's what they call the SEAL delivery vehicle, the little mini sub that the subs will carry to.
Oh, cool.
These guys. Yeah.
Okay, and so then you were out. Yeah, no parachute,
Yep.
Just jumped out and said peace.
Got out, and as it happens, my uncle, who went through the Naval Academy, and I was not wise enough to consult with before I went through my entry into the Navy. His ex-wife, my cousin's mother's, strangely enough, is friends with his current wife at the time, and she had mentioned the RTP area. Now, my wife had worked for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals in their quality assurance lab, and so RTP had a lot going on in terms of the pharmaceutical industry. I had the science background, and so we just literally, we packed up the cars, the cat, the tree, and we came down to North Carolina in June of 1996 with all our possessions. Furniture and everything was kind of loaded up. Navy was, storing that until we got settled. But that's what brought us to North Carolina, was the Research Triangle Park area. And, it was growing then, and it's growing crazy now.
Yeah. North Carolina, the Southeast, everywhere kind of warm, lower taxes. Yeah, the growth has just been explosive.
It sure has, yeah.
So, during this time, what's it like from like a personal development standpoint? You mentioned you were in construction for college. Like, was there ever, you had that kind of epiphany looking at that guy and realizing that's not calling in your life? Was there ever a time when you decided to like take a stab at self-development, reading books, educational books, business books, setting schedules, goals, that sort of thing? Did that ever happen to you?
I feel like I've had a couple of those instances that have built on each other in my life. The one that always stands out to me is sitting in my dorm room, and like I told you, I started in summer session, so this was the first fall that I was in, full-time at school, and it was one of those, I think, instances that every college kid experiences in life, and I just had this wave of anxiety come over me. I didn't even know where to go, what to do. I had dirty laundry. I had a haircut I needed to get. I had tests coming up. I had a report that needed to be done. I mean, it was just like everything just seemed to keep piling on, and I didn't even know where to get started. And so I just did what I felt like I could do, right? I just sat down and said, well, let me just write it all down. Let me just get it out of my head and figure out what it is that I'm dealing with, So I wrote it all down, and then it was like, okay. And I began to just prioritize. I didn't even realize what it was that I was doing. You know what I mean? This 7 Habits of Highly Successful People kind of approach. And that was one of the first times in life.
Had you read the book at the time, or was this?
No, I was completely unaware of the book. Absolutely, yeah. And so you had that, wow. And then definitely. Had a couple of other instances, but it's been kind of little pieces like that have built on along the way to kind of develop that.
Yeah. Okay. So that kind of started it, and then would you say that led you on a path to like educating yourself, doing self-education, stuff like that? Oh
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't really finish the question. So. I think that when I began to consciously approach, self-development was more of when I got into sales. And that really provoked my thinking, because up to that point, I didn't have a lot of self-awareness. This was before emotional intelligence came along and, is what it is today with the buzzword. And, in sales training, you do all kinds of role playing, they'll videotape you, things of that nature. And seeing yourself on videotape for the first, it's one thing to hear yourself on a voicemail, but to see yourself on videotape is, it's really cringy. It's very illuminating. So it prompted me though to be like, hey, body language is a big deal. It's not just about the words you use. It's about how you deliver them. It's about your body language, being receptive, things like that. So definitely going through like the Myers-Briggs, through the DISC profile. I can't think of any books per se I've read offhand, but certainly done a vast amount of reading on the internet, and just really challenging myself to be a more approachable person and be better in my delivery, because it's not so much that we want to control other people in conversations and interactions, but certainly we want to try to be influential. And in particular, if you're talking to people about the Lord and how God works in your life. So I think it's important to definitely to do that. And you married man, it's not hey, all the vows and everything's happy ever after Cinderella time. That's when the real work begins. And you want to practice communication. Try to get along with your wife perfectly every single day.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. So I think with sales, it is kind of like, even though you're an employee, it's a very entrepreneurial type of profession, because it's all about like improving yourself. How can you get better? I mean, you're not trading time for money. Like, it's all performance based, and so you have to really figure out a lot of different things, like you mentioned. And so it sounds like this is when you kind of really turned over a new page. And so but at this point you were already married when you started doing pharmaceutical sales?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
We had 2 little girls.
And you already had 2 girls at the time?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's
okay.
Right.
So this is off topic, but I like talking about the subject of like work-life balance or success-life balance, because it's like you got one end of the spectrum where people say, hey, like, prioritize your family above all else, no matter what. Like, always stop your work every single evening at 6 p.m. and give it all to them. And then you got other people who just say, hey, like, it's both. Like, give 100% to your work, give 100% to your family, and like, you make it you make both work. You dedicate yourself to both. And so I kind of feel like it ebbs and flows personally. I kind of feel like there are certain times in your life where you have to focus on work more than your family, and we're made to feel guilty about that sometimes. And there's certain times in life where you can focus on your family because you've done the things that you had to do in your career. You put in the hours, you traveled, you sacrificed time away from your family, but now you're able to go back and spend time with them. So I feel like the work-life balance is like a misnomer, because it's not really balanced. It's always unbalanced, but it's always changing. So I'm just curious, like, how did you work through that at the time?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely, it does ebb and flow, and that dynamic changes maybe on a daily, weekly basis for you. Absolutely, I think it's the old saying where you gotta know when to cut your losses, so to speak. It sounds like you're a lot the same kind of guy as me. You don't want to quit. You don't want to give up on anything, even if it means losing toenails, right? You just don't want to give in. So I think it was difficult for me to really kind of find the fine line there. Okay, hey, you know what? I've made an investment in this effort, and I need to shift gears and try something different. You're not going to get your head through the brick wall. But when you have a little baby at home and you just started a new job, which was me in sales. Like you said, I had to put a lot into that, and I had to really get that geared up in order to establish a good foundation so that, not only could provide for my family monetarily, but, be there for them at home as well. And I feel like I've been able to be in a position since then. It's just so flexible being in sales, I mean, like you said, it's entrepreneurial in a way. So you kind of eat what you kill, and you need to know when to go hunt and when to go home and prepare for the winter, if you will. And it's just, you kind of learn that along the way. But I think for me, the most challenging thing is when you do find yourself getting in kind of a rut, whether it's either at home or through work or a little bit of both, recognizing when that's happening and finding a way to either break that cycle or get yourself motivated to re-energize and get back in the game, if you will.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Like, so do you have a specific example of like how you could break the cycle?
Well, again, I think it comes back to the self-reflection we're talking about. You hear people say, "Hey, we got to take a temperature check." Well, put it on your calendar. Check yourself out every few months. Be aware of your trigger points. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you know what? I got a little anxiety building. It's not like me to be anxious. What's going on here? Don't let things sneak up on you. Particularly as we get older, you would hope that you become more familiar with yourself and your trigger points and things of that nature. And you just step back. And whether that means you take an hour to yourself, whether that means you do like myself and I go mountain biking, where it's absolutely therapeutic and cathartic for me, and I just go through more healing doing that than I could ever get from any therapist, any time,
Yeah.
money.
Yeah. No, putting it on the calendar, that's a great takeaway. That's a good bit right there. Like I've had to start doing that recently because you can have to-do lists, but if you don't put it on the calendar, like it's unlikely that it gets done. So
Yeah.
I think that's great. And then I know we were talking earlier. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I read, I think it was on LinkedIn one time, and I was going through, and I follow Richard Branson, and he has some good stuff in there. I kind of respect him as an entrepreneur. I think he's definitely entrepreneurial, successful, but he's a good guy. He's done it the right way. And I believe it was on one of his posts that he's never used a to-do list, okay? I've tried to-do lists in the past, and it's like, well, I got a to-do list. Well, then I start to categorize the to-do list, and then you got all of your appointments, and it just got so overwhelming and complicated. I just did away with it and said, you know what? Like you just said, if it needs to be done, I'm going to put it on the calendar and give it a particular time.
Yeah.
If it doesn't happen, then I'm going to move it, but it doesn't go away. You know what I'm saying? And I might have a hard stop. But then I come along and I read this post, and that's how he does it. And I was like, ooh, I feel validated there. Here's a guy who's very successful, and that's the way he does it. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know we talked a lot earlier about your faith and how that has affected you. So was there ever any, like, when you were finding your faith and, working in sales, was like, how did those two things unravel? Because some people would say they're in opposition to each other.
I agree. Yep. And let's see. When I started sales in 2002, I was not yet a believer. We had the two girls. And then 2003, which, do the math here, my wife gets pregnant with twin boys. So my youngest daughter and my twin boys are only 17 months apart. And the obstetrician who has delivered all of our kids, I'd been to her appointments early on, and we kind of hit it off, and we liked each other and so forth. And he's a high energy, go-getter kind of guy, So she's got the twins. She's going to the appointments. I'm not going with her. This is old news. This is the third time, that kind of thing. But he keeps bugging her. Hey, tell Daryl to come to my Bible study. Tell Daryl to come to my Bible study. So she comes home, and she's like, look, man, you just got to go. Now, mind you, she's been brought up Catholic, okay? I didn't come up atheist or anything like that. It was just very agnostic. In the meantime, she'd been dragging me into the Catholic Church here and there, and I just really wasn't taken to it. It wasn't sticking for me. And so I decided that, hey, the scientist in me, I'm going to go read the Bible, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going to use that to prove to her that this is all a bunch of nonsense, okay? This 7 days to creation and so on and so forth. So I start reading the Bible. Meanwhile, he's bugging me to come to the Bible study. And I guarantee you, it's the Holy Spirit that's working in my life. There's other things that come along that really start to challenge my way of thinking, my perceptions of the world. And so I go to the Bible study. I get down there the first night, and it's a room full of really strong alpha males. And then they break out the guitar, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to have the kumbaya and everything. I sit through the whole thing, and by the end of that night, I was like, this is crazy. Like, these guys are believers. These dudes are hardcore conservative dudes. And that's really what was the genesis of, me being led to Christ by this obstetrician of ours who's become a great friend and mentor over the years now.
Mm. But yeah, that's a cool story. So, I mean, I think it's interesting that you're a scientist. So, would you say that you set out to disprove some of the things, and then
Absolutely.
you
Oh,
weren't
by all
able to?
means.
Like, what happened?
Well, I think that I always say this because I'm not the only one. You have the other fella, drawing a blank on his name, who wrote the book about this. He's a lawyer, had the similar experience, in what I'm talking about. I think when people decide to pick up God's word and read it in order to disprove it, he gets a big grin on his face because he's like, I got your attention now. And he always wins, So, yeah, I set out to disprove it. And, I was going to use the science. So all of, Darwinian evolutionary theories and genetics and, all of these sorts of things, carbon dating, the whole nine yards. And that's what I set out to do. And it just didn't work out that way.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's great. So, yeah, essentially, a lot of, I think this, in short, if you don't believe it, you don't think it's true, do the research for yourself. Try and disprove it, right? And so, yeah, I think that's a great takeaway. And so, then, I mean, how do you think that that has affected, your faith has affected just, like, your career and, like, getting to where you are now, and then just in terms of, like, level of success versus, like, did you ever feel like it was holding you back? Or do you feel like it propelled you forward? You know what I mean? Like, how would you explain that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I didn't finish answering your question. It wasn't hard for me in pharmaceutical or in sales I didn't feel like there was any contrast or contradiction rather to be a believer and to be in sales. I think you can do both. I think you can do everything to the glory of the Lord. The difficulty was that they wanted me to book certain things that I wasn't going to do, and that did create problems for me. Okay, I did incur some, difficulties and persecution to a certain degree that I probably wouldn't have otherwise, but that's fine because it's a matter of principle. I've always been a principle kind of guy even before I was a believer, so I was used to that. But it did help me to kind of take the edge off of that response that I would have normally had. And throughout the rest of my career, I praise God every day. I mean, there's so many things that I don't believe I could have gotten through or would have seen the right way in order to achieve what I've achieved without his divine intervention and my wife being a believer and supporting me from a worldview that we both subscribe to and understand is greater than we are.
So, yeah, and so I know sometimes you can compromise your values, in sales. Like that's a big part of it. And so it sounds like you didn't do that, and it worked out. And so I think that's great. How did you take that transition from sales to real estate?
Yeah, that's an interesting story too. So once again, through a Bible study, the same one, the guy I work for now, Michael Riccobene, he came in. He was looking to reconnect, and over the course of a couple of years, the pharmaceutical company, started doing layoffs and drawdowns and everything. And I was talking to him, and he was like, "Hey, I got some things I could use help with." So sure enough, I got hit with a severance, and as soon as the check cleared, I went straight over to work for him. And out of the gate, he had several kind of slum homes down in what we call Johnston County, North Carolina, and Mr. Jimmy was running things and not doing a good job of that. So long story short, we ended up just pretty much getting them cleaned up, cleared out as much as possible, and getting those sold. So we sold them to one of the guys who would do some of the repair work for us. He bought a couple of them, turn them around, use them as rentals. A couple of them were just absolutely no way to sell them, and they were adjacent to the Lucama maintenance yard. And so I worked it out with the Lucama Town Council to go ahead and buy that property so they could extend their maintenance yards. So that was kind of the first foray into real estate, and then that was in the first year and a half or two. In the meantime,
What year is this?
This is October 2011 in through 12 and early part of 13.
So this is like at the bottom of the real estate market, really.
Oh yeah, it was.
So you said you sold some of these properties. I mean, was it a fire sale? I mean, because housing prices just were not high at the time.
Well, oh yeah, they were. So I put together a spreadsheet. Hey, here's how much we got left on them. I worked with a real estate agent in a lot of regards. And like I said, it was a kind of a fire sale. We got, the local slumlord. He grabbed a couple of them and he turns them around, and they basically get tenants in there who are, like Section 8 type of housing. One house in particular, it was vacant and literally right by the train tracks, and so I would go by there periodically because there was a unsavory character that would use it for,
Drug use,
drug transactions and trades and so forth. And I always carry. I got concealed carry, so I'm carrying. I walk in, announce myself, and they'd be fresh tracks, if you will. And they finally burnt that place to the ground with cigarettes, I think. And so the insurance company paid him off on that, and he still has the lot, but everything got covered by the insurance claim.
Oh man. So Michael essentially had some rental properties, not in great areas, and then he brought you on to help you kind of manage them and sell them or whatever. So, I mean, what was his story on those? Like, did he take a bath on those, or did he have them for like a long time? I mean, did it end up being a good or a bad transaction?
No, he took a bath on those. Yeah, for the most part.
Okay.
Right.
So, so this was totally separate from Riccobene and Associates.
Well, like I say, concurrently, I was also learning the dental operations.
Okay.
And so I believe it was like right around 2013, he created the chief operating officer position, and I took that role. And I was in that role until 2018. And in 18 is whenever the company restructured into a DSO with the private equity backing. And so they came along, and they obviously want to put their own kind of structure in place. I didn't have the experience that they were looking for in terms of the kind of growth they wanted to do with the acquisition and whatnot. And so that's when I was moved or restructured into pretty much the role that I'm in now.
Okay. How did things change? And so pretty much from 2018, did he grow without any private equity? Was it all just bootstrapped, or was it bank debt, or what?
No, it was all organic growth. It was strictly all de novo. So he started with one office, and by the time I came on board in 2011, we had 7 locations, and then we added more de novos. A couple of the locations, we had more property, so we literally doubled the size of the practice by adding another equal footprint of the clinic right there. So
when you said you had more room to grow, did he own these locations, or was there just vacancy next door?
In these cases, he actually owns the real estate and the building. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have mixed ownership with a lot of the practices. Even with acquisitions, sometimes if it's like a standalone building, we'll acquire the property along with the practice and the assets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of times the dentists or the doctors, they want to sell because just wipe their hands of it, Mm-hmm. And honestly, can't blame them. I think it's a good move because if you, it's just situational. Sometimes it makes sense to sell, sometimes it doesn't. The benefit of selling your real estate with your practice is that you are diversifying a lot, because if you hold on to the real estate, sure, you've taken some chips off the table by selling the business, but the value of your building is still tied to that tenant occupying and doing business, right? So you're still tied in. You're not diversified away from the dental industry, even though you're technically in real estate. And so, yeah, I think it's smart a lot of times to be done with it and then reinvest that money into something with more diversification. So, yeah, I get both sides.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of times it just depends on the pain point of the dentist who's selling. Sometimes they want to hold on to the real estate because they feel like that they're going to go into real estate, and we've even had them come back to the table a year later and be like, hey, I'm ready to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so do you guys have a preference between buying versus leasing your real estate?
It seems to be almost emotionally based. All right. I've not seen that we have any preference. I do know that definitely the willingness is there to buy the property. A lot of it has really been dependent on the selling dentist, like I said. So probably 85% of the practices that we've acquired that have a real estate component to them that is able to be purchased, we have done so. We have purchased that. So then we have the both the dental practice and assets along with the real estate. And then in that case, there's a separate corporate entity that he owns that he uses for the real estate purchase. And then so the DSO will then now lease back from that real estate entity.
Yeah, it's absolutely a smart way to grow. Again, it's situational, right? It's like what we've noticed is a lot of times as you get started, maybe you have one single location, it makes sense to own your real estate because you don't need the capital to grow. But as you start to grow and you need money for acquisitions, then it starts to make a little bit less sense to buy the real estate because you're getting a decent ROI. Maybe it's 10, 15, 18% from the real estate, but you're probably getting 30, 40%, 50, even more from your business, right? And so if one is constricting the other, you got to go with the one with the higher ROI. So we kind of see like it go full circle. It starts out, people buy the real estate for a single location, and then they kind of stop buying it so they can focus on practices and they can grow, and they get to the point where they have enough capital, they can afford to buy the real estate and still grow the practices at the same time. And I don't know, was it a similar experience for what you guys did, or did you just buy it all the way along the way?
Well, I think it's a little unique in this situation because the real estate entity is not tied to the actual DSO or the dental side of the business. The real estate entity is actually wholly owned by Dr. Riccobene.
Okay.
So that is his personal ownership, and that's not tied to the board of directors for the dental services organization or anything having to do with the dental side of the business. So, it's a unique kind of relationship, and I guess it works legally. There's no, anti-kickback or anything that comes into play there.
No, I've definitely heard of plenty of people who do that. That's totally up to them how they want to structure that. So when you had 7, you said you started when there were 7 locations, and you guys grew to how many locations?
Between when I came on board and when they partnered with the private equity, we went from 7 to 16. But in that growth, we also added all the dental specialty as well. So you went from just general dentistry. We added kids dentistry, pedodontics, endodontics for root canals, oral surgery, orthodontics, periodontics, and that's it, really.
So you're also growing the number of locations, and I guess it sounds like you expanded. So you grew the revenue per location as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's a massive growth time.
Yeah, and it was even internal growth too. So, you could have the de novo, you could have the acquisition, but you also have space within the practices, right? So we've literally taken offices and bathrooms and we've converted them into operatories in order to...
How many operatories per location do you like to have?
Our wheelhouse right now we're doing is about 10 ops per practice.
Is that about 33,000 square feet?
We've been putting those in anywhere between 2,800 and 3,200 square feet.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so very efficient. And then... So when private equity came along and gave you guys some capital to really add some rocket fuel to your operations, that's when you kind of grew from the 17 to the wherever you're at now. And in that process, are you doing that same kind of that formula, which is where you acquire a practice, look for room to expand, maybe expand the physical footprint and the amount of services?
Absolutely. We've done plenty of that. You bet. We bring them on board, and if there's room for expansion or a way to improve workflow and get more per hour, if you will, then we've done all of that for sure. So it might be operatories, it might be equipment that helps with that, it might be the type of doctor. Marketing obviously plays into that. If we had room for getting more patients into the door to make use of what was already there, so you bet. That's really the whole key behind acquisition. That's what either it's an older dentist looking to retire and they're scaling back, or somebody who thought out of dental school sounded like a great idea to hang a shingle and then realized that running a business is more than just, drilling and filling. So,
yeah. What do you think is the biggest bottleneck for you guys when it comes to real estate right now? Because you're doing both acquisitions and de novos. So,
yeah, I think right now with real estate the way that it is, it's really interesting because as much as you have the COVID impact where a lot of businesses are going away from the brick and mortar and recognizing technology is available to have people work remotely, we still need consumers, right? We still have people going out to shop. You still have to go out to the dentist. And it's interesting how the availability of space is either kind of in a neighborhood or an area where there's not any good anchor stores, and the rent might be good, but drive-by traffic is horrible, and it's not a good place in town. All the way over to like here in Cary, they're developing a place called Fenton, and it's huge, and you got rent rates that are $40 a square foot. So for us, the bottleneck, I think, is being able to find those sweet spots. We like those places that are high visibility, good anchor stores, and even if there's something that might be a build to suit, we could entertain that too. So it's just a variable amount of things that it's been difficult to really pin down.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of at that tricky spot too, because 3,000 square feet. A lot of times, if you want to do a standalone building, you're developing. You take down an acre, right, and you're gonna have to get it pad ready, which means you flatten it. You get all the infrastructure ready with the piping and the electricity and the power and all that kind of stuff. And so, really, the minimum is usually not the minimum. There is no minimum, but like the sweet spot is kind of for 1 acre is about 5,000 square feet. Maybe sometimes you can squeeze on 7, and so it's a difficult. You got a difficult thing there trying to do a standalone, 3,000 square foot building. So it means that you're either gonna have to take on partners or just look at, like, and by partners I mean other tenants, in multi-tenant buildings,
Yep.
or go inline in retail centers. And so neither of those is a bad option. But do you have a preference for that, for either one of those?
Well, I mean, I don't have any preference. You know what I mean? I'm just kind of like, hey, I'm here to do it all. And we haven't really done, apart from the 2 practices I talked about earlier, we haven't done anything from dirt to roof. Okay. Now we are working on a deal right now where it is a buy and build, and we're looking at it's roughly 3.6 acres. It's in a great area, and we're looking to do that in order to relocate one of our practices. It's in a plaza that literally is 200 meters away that we acquired, and it's just a horrible footprint. It's all cut up, small corridors, but we want to put a 15,000 square foot building on there, and to your point, put our practice in there, and then lease out to medical and that kind of a tenant. So
Would you do retail too? Like, would you do restaurants and bars and that sort of thing, or are you trying to stick with strictly medical?
So in this case, I have explored that with him, and he's not interested in doing the mixed retail. I think it's a great concept, particularly the location that we're at. But I think that's. I mean, you look at a lot of these new develops nowadays, like where they're trying to gentrify areas, and what they've done over here in Raleigh and on the Six Forks area, they do. Right, all the bottom floor is going to be all your retail, and then you have the apartment living up above, and I think it's an excellent model. It fits well with a lot of the consumer base now, with your millennials and Gen Z folks coming along, and that's a great model. It just isn't something that he's looking to do with this particular site. So
Yeah,
I like it all. I like to do.
me
I
too.
get involved with everything from the LOI all the way through with the architect and the GC, and all the way to the CO, and whether it's a dark empty shell or buy and build site. I enjoy the diversity and the challenges that come along with each project.
Yeah. So, the hard parts are identifying the locations, right? And then also, when you identify them, how do you take them down? Because you're dealing right now with inflation being extremely high. You're dealing with supply chain issues, stuff not being able to come to the ports. And so, the cost of building things and the price of getting people to work is higher than it's ever been. But by the same token, I don't see it getting any cheaper either.
I don't think it's going to come back. Right? It's kind of like this whole issue with the federal government. I mean, once they get their hooks in a little deeper, they're not going to back out. So the supply chain, I don't know that we'll ever get back to where we were in 2014, 15, that area. That's a great point.
How many locations are you trying to go by through de novo each year?
Well, that's a good question, and it's changed recently. So we were targeting 2 to 3. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
We're being asked to get a little bit more aggressive in 22 and 23. And
So your
probably
plate,
the reason for that
your plate
is,
just got a lot more full.
Yeah, exactly. Part of the reason for that is if you look at other DSOs that are out there, a lot of them will focus on either acquisition or the de novo growth. And to do it mixed is a real challenge. And we do a nice job with de novo. We know how to make that work. and we have a good track record with that. So acquisitions are really a lot of unknowns, right? I mean, you can do all of your due diligence, quality of earnings, all of these kind of things, but there's always these hidden traps that you run across in there. So it's
Especially the price right now. I mean, the multiples that you're paying on these
oh
earnings
yeah,
is at
right,
record highs. So
exactly.
I mean, yeah, I think de novos make a lot of sense.
I agree. Yeah, because you get to set your culture too right off the bat. You know what I mean? Just everything operationally is a lot smoother.
Hmm. So yeah, it sounds like the biggest pain or the most time consuming part is just picking the viable spots. And you said you want those high visibility, high retail spaces. So you're pretty much within the state of North Carolina. I know you're mostly focused on Raleigh. How are you actually identifying? Like, what's your process for identifying locations?
Well, I have brokers that I work with. I've been contacted by other folks out there who have older buildings that they're trying to flip. The businesses we're in that have been cleared out, and so it's a lot of word of mouth. Like Dr. Riccobene's had. He's got a pretty good network, so he'll have other people that'll reach out to him as well. So it's just been a whole host of different sources.
Hmm. Okay. Um, and so you're working with different brokers. Like, are you running demographic analyses? Like, do you have a gut feel for the certain areas that you're going to? Like, are you trying? You mentioned $40 a square foot. Do you have certain parameters that you try and stay under?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we'd like to pay $10 a square foot, right? No, we have parameters that we try to work within, and a lot of times you just got to deal with fair market value and take a look at it. And hey, if you're paying higher rents, maybe you're getting better reimbursement rates. Maybe you got better quality of patient, that sort of thing. So, you have the one end where it's you're doing a pro forma of the build, and how much is it going to cost. But then you also have the other end where you're taking a look at these demographics you're talking about, and your vehicles per day, your population, potential growth. And there's a platform that we're getting worked up right now. They're in the process of building out the model based on the data they're getting from our practices. It's called Buxton, and
Yep. Yeah.
they have really unique approach to things, and I'm really excited about getting that into place because I think that the kind of reports that it can generate are going to be our traditional type of census data, things of that nature, but also more real-time information that we can gather using the geofencing capabilities that they employ. So those, yeah, definitely traditional demographic markers, and really looking, what's some of our competition out there as well. What's that look like? The density of it. How good are they? Is it a mom and pop versus an Aspen Dental or something like that? All those, they take time. You're right. Those things just take some time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
definitely doing a boots on the ground drive-by, right? You can go to Google Maps and do the street view and get a sense, but when we get to the point where we're close to pulling the trigger, if I haven't been there yet, we go drive-by.
Yeah. And I know North Carolina is typically like a difficult market to crack in terms of insurance reimbursement rates and Medicaid. But it sounds like you guys have obviously made it work. Now you're in Virginia too? Are you going to other states now?
Yeah, they're looking into South Carolina right now for some acquisition down there, and definitely going to get kicked up with starting some search around Myrtle Beach for some de novo placement also.
Nice. That's where we used to spring break in high school.
Yeah. Believe it or not, it's an underserved community for dentistry.
Well, yeah, that's crazy. I can kind of see it because it was always had a bad reputation for being kind of like a small poor town or whatever. But like, I can totally see how there's opportunity there too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
We talked about inflation a little bit. Prices aren't going back down; they're only probably going to go up. So on that note, like where do you see the economy going from here, and where do you see the dental industry going from here?
Man, I'll tell you, I try not to be a Debbie Downer or a doomsday kind of guy. I really do have high hopes that my fellow Americans have the same sentiment as myself, and it seems like most people I talk to do, in that we really need to have a social and economic revolution in this country. You know what I mean? It's not an American direction. So my hopes is that, once we can get through this administration, we get redirected and get this country back on a healthy path. But again, that's going to take some time to correct and get back to. With the government printing money the way that they are, it's like, kind of talked about before. You go back to the science of things. We lived in a closed system. If you heavy on this side of the equation, you're light on this side. So you can print all the money in the world, but you're going to get inflation from that. And ironically, they do these things under the guise of helping out the poor guy out on the street. It hurts him. Price of milk goes up. Price of gas goes up. Everything goes up, and it's just counterproductive. So I don't know, Austin. That's a great question, and I wish I had a more optimistic and solid answer. It's really hard to say.
I know. At this stage, the only solution is to inflate our way out of the problem again, which is still creates more problem down the road. So it's just a combination, or it's just a process of kicking the can down the road. Each politician kicks it down further and further because they don't want to be the ones responsible for dismembering social security, right, or all the health systems or whatever. There's a great book called The Creature from Jekyll Island about the Fed. Have you heard about that one?
No, I haven't.
It's all about the Fed, the creation of the Fed, and how exactly like you said, it's designed to create inflation of 2% a year, and it's a public mandate, so it's stated like a good thing. But you're right in the sense that it's hurting the guys that it's supposed to protect, and so voters just have no idea. They just the average everyday salary or wage earners will vote for these policies that give them free things from the government because they think they're taking from the rich and giving it themselves, but really they're not. What's happening is we're creating more debt, and so that debt is used to create handouts and welfare programs that people use. So it's a free lunch now, but what happens is they're getting those benefits now, and then in order to pay for that, they have to print more money to devalue the massive amounts of debt that the country is owed, or that the country owes, and then the prices of goods go up, right? You print more money, businesses have to charge more money because they're paying more money, and the last person to see the increase from inflation are the wage earners, the same people who voted it into effect. And so until voters wake up and really see these programs that of giving people free stuff is not helping them, it's hurting them, I don't see any way out of this cycle. All that being said, there's a saying in investing, don't fight the Fed. So you can get upset about it or not. That's the way that it is. I personally don't have enough power to change it. I could talk about it on platforms like this, but given things that are the way they are, I have no choice but to keep moving forward. And so that's why I like real estate. Lock in fixed debt on an appreciating asset, and inflation works in your favor. So I don't like it. It is what it is, but that's kind of my plan.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. And really, everybody always thinks about a home as being an investment, right? Well, it's only a good investment insofar as there's a market for it. What worries me is that we would ever get to a point where they had happen in Venezuela, like you've had happen in Greece, and other countries who've evolved into a socialistic or communistic type of a government, which is where we seem to be headed, and all of a sudden your property doesn't have that value anymore.
Yeah, you got to be careful, and also, it's only an investment. If you're putting money out of your pocket every month into that asset, it's not really an asset until the day you sell it. It's really an expense,
Yep.
And so you got to have confidence that it's going to continue to go up. Personally, I do, because I think we're on a bad trajectory, but I think it'll take a long time before we go full socialist. And so I have confidence that we'll be able to do the fundamentals, right? Obviously, you're still opening new dental practices, so you do believe you have some optimism in the future, because you can't just sit around and do nothing. You know what I mean? You can't just sit around on the sidelines.
No.
You got to keep trucking, moving forward.
No, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not to say that everybody should just go sit on the sidelines and be like, hey, the game's over. We're down by 14 points, Not at all. You keep fighting till the bitter end. Absolutely. Yep. Never say die. It reminds me of the picture of the frog being swallowed by the pelican or whatever, right? And the frog's got his hands around the pelican's throat and just never give up.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to finish it. Is hey, never give up. Keep fighting. And
right.
Eventually, hopefully things will work out for the better.
That's right. Yep.
Well, cool. So if anybody wants to get in touch, reach out, learn more about what you guys do. What's a good contact point?
Well, I can be reached by email at daryl.cunningham@brushandfloss.com. And my first name is spelled Daryl. There's a lot of different spellings for it. So that's a good way to get a hold of me for sure.
Brushandfloss.com?
That's right.
Yeah, I'll write that down in the show notes. I know I got it as well. So cool. And then is there a good website?
Yeah, our company website is actually brushandfloss.com.
That's such a good name.
Dr. Riccobene is a unique individual insofar as he's got a lot of good vision and foresight, and he bought that URL. I want to say he said back in the late '90s, while he was
Wow.
still in dental school.
Wow. Um,
Yeah.
okay. Well, hey, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thanks so much for being generous with your time and talking about real estate with me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, this has been great, Austin. I really wish you the best in all that you do, and let's just keep plugging away. Be great Americans, be great believers.
Yes. Cool, man.